Hey, everybody. This is Michelle.
And this is Julie coming to you from Seattle, Washington, the Emerald City. How you doing today, Michelle?
I am good.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's Sunday for us when we're recording, so it's been a good day.
Good. We even went to the grocery store.
We did.
That's pretty much all we've done today. Couple loads of laundry,
Me too.
grocery store.
Laundry, groceries, typical weekend stuff for me.
Trying to be creative with some meals for the coming week. But of course, it's going to all be Mexican because that's what I seem to make a lot.
That's good food anytime.
I know.
Really. That's what I did. I came home and made guacamole.
Did you?
Mm-hmm.
You might have to share.
Yeah.
For my Mexican carne asada.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyway, so we have a fun one here today.
We do. This is conversation about intimacy.
A sexy conversation about intimacy?
Yes.
Okay.
Sexy conversation about intimacy.
So do you think, let's just start out with, do you think that you need to have intimacy with sex?
Well, no,
Okay.
you don't.
I'm glad you think that way.
Yeah.
Because that's like very common.
I know. Yeah. Just get that shit over with.
Yeah. Oh, I think when people think of the word intimacy, they probably think of sex, like it being the only way maybe you can have intimacy with another person. But
Yeah. I agree. Think you're right.
there are different types of intimacy, though, you know?
There's actually, this was kind of interesting as I was looking at things in regard to intimacy because, I have my own thought process of what intimacy is, what it can be. And I think, too, when you hear the word intimacy, like you were saying, I think most people think of sex, but it's also something shared between romantic partners.
Correct.
Which isn't really necessarily the case as far as intimacy goes. It can be, well, when you think about people describe a cozy setting as intimate.
Yeah.
So
Another way of looking at the word itself. I don't think it just has to do with romantic partners either.
Yeah.
I think when I think of kind of romantic partners and intimacy, I think of being able to connect with somebody without even being able to without saying anything. You can look someone across the room and give them a look and they know what you mean or they know what you think.
Yeah, I love that.
I love that too.
That's kind of sexy.
It's super sexy. And,
Yeah.
and then you can just, anyway, doesn't
That's
matter.
wherein that intertwines. I mean, I know there is, when you think of sex, sexy, intimate, there is a lot of crossover with that, obviously.
Think of being at a dinner party, like a really busy dinner party, and you kind of look at your person across the room and they're looking at you and you're looking at them, and then you give them a little nod of the head. And I don't know, the powder room's just down the hall.
Oh, powder room.
Okay, what else would you call it? The half bath is just down the hall.
No, I just mean that. Where are you going? Keep going.
I don't know. I'm just thinking about it because it's like when you have that type of intimacy, you're like, hey, let's take a little break.
That's what I mean. Are you going to go have a meeting in the ladies' room?
Meeting in the ladies' room. Except there would not be two ladies. In this case, it would be a guy and some girl that they like each other.
Yeah.
They don't even have to be. Well, I was in my mind. I was having a little fantasy in my head, and the fantasy did not include another woman. It included another man, super hot man. I'm not going to go into much more detail than that. I have some ideas in my head.
Maybe in his head it included another lady.
The threesome in the powder room might get a little crowded.
We're getting
Michelle,
off track. We're getting off track.
Okay, so different types of intimacy. So we were talking about physical, obviously. Emotional intimacy to me is probably one of the sweetest things you can have with another person, because that's the thing I'm talking about, the emotional intimacy, when you can look at somebody, or when you look at somebody and you can understand what they're thinking by just looking at them. That is definitely, in my opinion, a kind of a deep emotional connection. There's also kind of intellectual intimacy.
Oh, I love the emotional. Can we just go back to that for a second?
Yeah.
Listening to you, of course, it makes me think of things
Yeah.
that I've experienced. And you're right. Like when you can just look at someone,
That's the best.
you can tell, to your point, what they're thinking. You might be able to tell if they're feeling some kind of way. And when you really have that connection with somebody, most times you're probably spot on.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like that's probably the hardest thing to achieve, because when you talk about intimacy, like with a romantic partner, for example, because I think, again, that's a lot of what we're talking about. The biggest obstacle to that is being able to develop trust. And it takes time to develop trust. That trust corresponds with feeling of being vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And being vulnerable really is one of the basic fundamentals, in my opinion, of having that type of intimate connection with somebody. Because if you can be vulnerable with them, or you can just be you, just do you, boo. Mm-hmm. If you can just be you and they love you and accept you for the way that you are, it's like there's no bigger gift in my mind, that you can have from another person than something like that.
I kind of saw that as a common thread through all these, and we're going to get to some more types of intimacy, but the common thread that I noticed was the no judgment part.
Yeah.
When you do, when you build that relationship and you have that connection on all of these levels, the no judgment part is key.
Because you have to be able to be vulnerable in order to feel like, well, I shouldn't say that. In order to be vulnerable, you have to feel like you're not going to be judged for whatever it is that, you're concerned about. And people's actions will speak equally as loud as their words, or more, louder in a lot of respects in their words, So I think that there's definitely times when you just kind of keep things to the side, or people don't talk about stuff that they're uncomfortable about because they don't want to, be uncomfortable, but also they might not want to know the answer.
It feels risky.
Yeah. So it's not something that you can really achieve successfully with an individual that you don't know very well, maybe, or that you don't have that bond and trust created with. So that's the challenge. And even, being married, people are in married relationships. We were in married relationships, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it equates to intimacy.
Right.
Because
100% right.
100% right. Because you're going through your day to day, you're doing your thing, and it's like you just assume that person's there and that they're feeling the same way you are. But that's one of the things I think that gets lost in relationships after they're brand new, and the fun and sparkle has worn off a little bit, and you're getting into more of the day to day. Some people don't do day to day very well.
Yeah. And I think that's where communication is so important.
Right.
In a day to day consistent relationship like that.
Also, things such as, now that we have our social media, I wouldn't even say that, maybe our phones is another example. It's like sending each other little text messages throughout the day. It doesn't have to even be much. It can be something kind of sexy and fun, or just like, hey, thinking about you, or what are you wearing? Things like that they're thinking about you, Or another thing would be just a very simple, you get home, or you are, say, going out for an evening or something, and it's that brush of the hand, that touch of the back, those little intimate things that you wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable with someone you didn't know very well.
Right.
Kind of, we were talking about some of the dating experiences earlier on in a couple of episodes, and the guy that I was telling you about that just was so, I don't know, PDA, big time.
Yeah.
And okay, if I knew him better, maybe I would have felt differently about it, but I didn't know him. And so I was like,
awkward.
What the hell are you doing? Yeah, it felt very strange to me. But maybe that's how he developed intimacy with other people. I don't know. We never really got the opportunity to figure it out after that. I kind of was like, no, I don't think so. But that kind of is a segue into how men and women view intimacy. Do you think it's different?
I think it's different. Yes.
How do you think men, and obviously men out there, we're speaking in generalities, but in your experiences, how do you think that men, even your sons, like watching the people that are in our lives, how do you feel like they handle it?
I think that for guys and I don't even think that they reflect on the fact that is this intimacy or not intimacy?
Right.
Women tend to think about that.
Overthink.
Intimacy. But for a guy, I think it's the actions, the doing things for them that is supportive, probably they're thinking in supportive way. And
so when you say actions, are you talking about like activities, or are you talking like acts of service kind of stuff?
Well, just like doing stuff, whatever it could, like anything, mowing the lawn. Yeah, I guess like just stuff that guys do.
Or making a special meal, or, making an effort. Oh my God. Making an effort, like a candlelit meal, or just, having something ready when that person's coming home, and it just, they're thinking about you.
Right.
Or you can just kind of let your hair down, and if you had a shitty day, it's okay. You don't have to pretend like you didn't have a shitty day, because this person genuinely cares about whether you are happy or in a good mood.
Right.
And why you might not be. So yeah, I think so too. I think men and women definitely look at that topic. I think men and women definitely look at intimacy differently. It's not to say that men don't want intimacy. I think there's a large population of men, at least that I've come in contact with, that are not interested in having any type of intimate contact with you, or that gets too committal, I guess. And you can definitely see that with people. And there's people that you are looking at going, no, I wouldn't want to have that type of interaction either. I don't think it's a 1, 2, 3, 4 times you're seeing somebody. I think it's over the course of time that you develop that. And it's with giving that person a chance to see you in a vulnerable way, or giving that person an opportunity to be there when you need them to be there, and they support you, or they got your back. They're there and they got your back. To me, that speaks to intimacy a lot, because that person's going to be in your corner, for whatever it is that you're doing. And we don't have those people in our lives in abundance, really, when you think about it. Your circle is small, or if your circle's large, which I feel like I've got a relatively large circle, but I don't have an intimate contact or intimate relationship with all the people that I know.
I was going to say, you can have a large circle, but the intimate circle is the inner circle. The inner circle.
The one that knows all the details about, whatever's going on. And we're talking girlfriends here, how we talk, and the details about what's happening in your life and the struggles you're having. And that same with a romantic partner, being able to have a conversation with your romantic partner and not have their eyes glaze over because they're not interested in what you're saying,
And I think for women, it's back to the difference between men and women. For women, I think intimacy is more personal. I think,
very much so.
Yeah. And guys, that's just part of the emotional being that we are as women. I
wonder why we are so much more so that way, more nurturing, not every woman obviously is like that. There are definitely men out there that are like that too, that, are not mansplaining or, out to just get laid. There are men out there like that. I haven't met all of them yet, but I know they are there. I think they're there somewhere, but that's kind of my thought on it too. I feel like it is definitely different, and it's something that you have to pick and choose a little bit with who you choose to be vulnerable with. So in the case of a romantic partner, it takes a lot of time for me to be able to be vulnerable enough to where I would be able to speak about things that I maybe wouldn't talk about with other people, because I feel like I wouldn't be judged.
There were, just as you are bringing up the fact about getting to know somebody, I saw that there's 5 levels.
Oh, please share.
Yeah, 5 levels of that emotional intimacy. So as you're getting to know someone, you kind of go through these levels as it progresses. So level 1 is safe communication.
Okay.
Level 2, others' opinions and beliefs. So sharing those things with each other.
Whether they are on the same page or not, I would assume.
Right. Yeah. Just like, what do you think about this person?
Or agree to disagree.
Yeah.
Like if you have strong opinions about something.
Yeah.
And they differ.
And then that's kind of goes into level 3, because level 3 is personal opinions and beliefs.
Okay.
And then 4 is feelings and experiences. And level 5 is my needs, emotions, and desires.
So that's as you said earlier when we were talking about this, that is kind of the icing on the cake. And the sex is absolutely 100%.
The cherry on top.
The cherry hasn't been popped on top. It was popped already a long time ago, I'm sure, but there is a cherry on top, and that is sex. So sex is awesome, as we all know, and so many different aspects of it are pretty cool. But really, you can have sex with anybody, and it can be fun and blah, 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 but it leaves you sometimes feeling unfulfilled.
Sex with somebody that you're intimate with?
Oh my God.
Game changer.
Game changers. Like you don't ever want to get out of bed. But yeah, that's the thing that I kind of struggle with, because it's like you have to be able to be vulnerable in order to have that intimacy with sex.
Yeah. So physical intimacy, of course, can be really amazing.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of times in relationships, when that intimacy is not being nourished, and recognized, that's where that sexual part can be really hard.
Well, I think so that actually is a really good point, because I think my thought process on it anyway is that having really good sex is tied to being vulnerable, like we talked about before, but it's also something where, especially if this is your partner, that you don't have like resentment or things built up.
Yeah.
Because that takes away from everything. And frankly, I think women just shut down. You know, I know myself, that's how I've been. You know, it's like, if I don't feel like I'm getting my needs met in other ways, or I'm being listened to, or whatever the case would be, it's like, I just would rather be a nun.
There's that feeling safe.
Yes.
And the trust factor.
Yeah.
All of those things that are so hugely contributed to that.
Yeah.
So without that part of the emotional intimacy, it can be, that's why I say it can be really hard.
But I mean, I know people, friends, you know, whatever, that have had partners, and there's a lot of controversy or things going on, lack of trust, but they still are like, yeah, I'm still having sex. And I'm like, I don't know. I think
having sex though.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Having
not, there's
sex.
no intimacy there.
Correct.
But I don't even think that having sex part would be fun. I'd feel like it was more of an obligation because I'm doing it because I'm supposed to, or because I'm, you know, I have an obligation, I guess, in some respects. If you're married, that sort of thing, you feel that way. But I'd rather not, because I feel like I'm not being my genuine self.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know. I have a really hard time with that.
So we've got physical intimacy, emotional intimacy. What about intellectual intimacy?
What do you think that is?
Intellectual intimacy, I think, is going to be mostly between two people in a romantic relationship. Well, it can be with friends too, but of course, so the romantic part, I was actually looking at this, and again, they were talking about the different ways in which you can build the intellectual intimacy with your partner. So asking, it's kind of similar, but asking your partner's opinions.
Okay.
Learning new skills together.
Okay.
Which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
And that makes sense.
Well, it's like even having a hobby together.
Yeah.
Or having, you know, something that you enjoy doing together that I believe builds intimacy. I mean, if your guy likes to fish, for example, maybe you're not a fisher person, but you know it's something that's important, but you could sit out in the boat while the fishing's happening and be able to have like a conversation with no phone around, nothing else going on, where you can actually talk about stuff, deep stuff.
Yeah. And like actually maybe fishing. If you don't know how to do that yet. But learning a new skill together, I think that brings that vulnerability piece puts that on the table.
Yeah.
Because if it's something that neither one of you know how to do and you're learning it together.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like what immediately comes to mind is cooking for some reason, because cooking can be very kind of sensual, sexy task that you do together. And especially when I don't really cook very much, or I do, but I keep it pretty basic.
You have to wear more than the apron, Jules.
What are you talking about? At least I have an apron, Michelle.
I know. But yes.
Yeah. But being able to like plan something and cook it together and have it meal together, you know, I think that is the most fun thing to do, you know, and be able to just, it's something that definitely brings you closer. Or like I'm thinking about going, like if you went on some hike and it was something that neither person had been to before, and you make it to the top and you're so excited, you did it together. They haven't done it with someone else. You know, I like the idea of when you're in a romantic relationship, doing things, going to places that neither one of you have been to before, because you're creating new memories together. And they're not shared with other people. Right. You know, then of course you've got your favorites that you've got to go to, the restaurants or whatever. But yeah, it's fun to try new things. So there's a gentleman that I had gone out with, and we went out a few times, and I just was choosing the date, and I chose something that we both never had done before. And I wasn't even sure how it was going to turn out, but it was this candlelight. It was they have them all over Seattle now. I can't remember what it's called. Secret Seattle, I think. Oh yeah. You were telling me about that. Yeah. They have all kinds of different ones, or they actually have musicians that are playing different songs. And it could be, I mean, I'm just trying to think of the songs that were on this particular evening were from movies. And I just chose this because it happened to be on the right night. I wouldn't necessarily have chosen that particular one. But again, something I'd never done before. It's something he'd never done before. So, and it was kind of romantic, because you're sitting there, there's violinists playing. And something I wouldn't probably normally go to, but everything is all candlelit all around there, Yeah. And it was just really pretty, very intimate setting, like you were talking about.
Setting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there were probably, 75 people there maybe kind of sitting around, but you didn't really notice that because your focus was on where all the candles were and where the musicians were. And the musicians told a little bit about what their story was behind the songs or whatever, when they had originally been recorded, and then they played them, themselves. So it was really fun. But little things like that you can do that are not things you've always done, have a more unique approach to things, I think definitely develops intimacy with people.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. And both people have to be willing, of course.
Of course. And kind of what you were talking about, another one is planning a vacation together.
Yeah.
So you kind of touched on that already.
I think that's a great way to get to know somebody better.
Well, there's a lot. I mean, I kind of did that with my sweetheart this last Christmas.
Yep.
We went on a ski trip together. So,
oh my gosh, those pictures were so awesome too. The skiing in and skiing out. And that was a really like a major step in your relationship, really, because the girls were with you guys.
Yeah.
And you both were in a place that you hadn't really been before. I mean, you had such a good time.
It was a great time. But yeah, just bringing those things together, doing something that you've not done together before. I haven't done much traveling. I've shared that before. He's done a lot of traveling. So of course he did most of the planning. I was just trying to support and be helpful as best I could.
Yeah. And shop. We had to shop for cute clothes for winter.
But we recognize that about each other also. It's his strength, not necessarily mine. So anyways, I don't know
the planning
but the planning
Well,
aspect.
we were talking about doing something you guys hadn't done before. And I do believe that travel in general, even if it's just like a long weekend, I think you can learn a lot about somebody and learn a lot about how to get closer if that is a person you're serious about.
Yeah.
Just by spending a couple of days and nights together, go hiking or have a fire or whatever. It depends where you're going, but a wonderful way to get to know somebody a lot better. And I'm a big fan of that. I don't think you need to wait, months to go overnight with somebody. I think it's totally fine to do, as you're building a relationship, to see if that's really the direction you're wanting to go.
Yeah.
And you might not once you finish with it. You might not.
So another one was watching movies and television shows together.
Okay. Like having your favorite.
Read the same books. Yeah. Like, again, like a book that you've never read before, neither one of you, and reading it and then coming together afterwards and talking about it.
Yeah. What about having a song? You guys have your song.
We have a song. Yeah. We have a song.
Yeah, I know, but it's something that you guys have kind of picked and is special to the two of you. And
it just
I'm
kind
big
of
into
evolved.
that stuff.
Yeah, it evolved into becoming our song. But yeah, we have a song.
Okay, well, people that are not intimately connected probably don't have a song.
Right.
So it's something to think about. I think what we were talking earlier too about it being something, whatever it is, when you're getting to know somebody or you're involved with somebody, that it's not one person making all of the planning, not one person handling all of these things to create these intimate moments, but it's both people making an effort to do that.
Yeah.
Because you have to ask yourself, it's like, if I didn't do this,
right, would this be happening?
Would it even be happening? Exactly.
Yeah.
And not everybody thinks the same. I mean, I feel like I'm kind of an emotional being, like we were talking about. Women in general, I think, are more emotional beings, and things that we would plan are kind of related to that, probably in some respects. I don't know that that's always the way it would be, though. I mean, maybe, like you were saying, men handle emotional connectivity or intimacy in a different way. So maybe their way of planning it would be different, or their way of preparing something for you guys to do together would be different. But the point is that they're trying and they're making an effort to connect. And if your person is not making an effort to connect, then that's a big red flag. That's something you really got to think about, because you don't want to be the individual who's putting in all the effort into a relationship to make it work and to have those intimate moments and such. It's got to be kind of reciprocated, I think.
And I think it's important to recognize what is being reciprocated.
Mm-hmm.
Because it might not necessarily be what you were expecting, but maybe that person is bringing the best that they know how
Right.
to the table. And I think it's important that people recognize that.
Do you think how people as adults develop intimate relationships directly relates to their growing up years in a way?
Absolutely.
If there was not a lot of affection in your family growing up, it would probably be a similar situation when you were getting to know people or even having your own family, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
Now, going back generations, I think that was very, very much the case. But people nowadays are more cognizant of those circumstances in the past and perhaps breaking the cycle because they don't want that for their kids. They don't want that for their family. They would prefer that they're more connected, in a way, not that they're all out hugging and kissing all the time, but, that they're definitely closer.
Well, and I think in just the intimacy part, it's important for if you have children for them to be able to see the intimacy that's shared between two people. And the last one, this is the last one of these that I was talking about, but is talking about core values.
Okay.
Spending time learning how each other feels about things in the world, things that you have in common, your relationship between each other.
Right.
Those kinds of things. So those are things that you can be doing. And again, I'm just going back to if you have children, because you were talking about how you were brought up.
Yeah.
Things that you see or witness in your parents or even amongst your siblings too, as far as a family intimacy.
That's always been something, well, since being divorced, especially, that was always something I was concerned about in the past, although I never really put it into words until after I was divorced, because I could see that the connectivity with my kids in particular, not necessarily with me and the kids, but it was very me and one child, me and the other child, me and the other child. We were never all together. So having that connectivity really was not there in the same way. They were kind of, in a lot of ways, strangers. As kids growing up, they fought a lot. I mean, I think that's pretty typical.
Yeah, that is.
But now what's been so important to me and really something I've focused on is giving them moments and opportunities to develop that type of intimate sibling relationship where they could rely on each other, or they could lean on each other if they needed to. And it's taken a few years, but I think over the course of time and the fact that they've gotten older and they now have their own experiences to kind of fall back on, they have become closer. And there's nothing a mom loves more than to see her kids relying on each other.
Yeah, very true.
And having that kind of intimate connection. I mean, I know your boys are always like that. I mean, when your ex passed away, it's like they were all together and they made everything work together as brothers. It was really cool to watch, because everybody was hurting and everything.
Yeah.
But they stood kind of strong with each other, which I thought was a really wonderful thing to see at his service.
Yeah. The fourth aspect of intimacy is what? Spiritual.
Yeah.
So we touched on physical, emotional, intellectual,
right?
And then there's spiritual. So what do you think that is? Spiritual intimacy.
I think having spiritual intimacy means that not necessarily they believe the same things or that you are embedded in organized religion by any means, but that your soul is more connected.
I think if you are faithful and honest in all the things you do, whether you're of the same religion or not, that's going to make a strong
spiritual connection. Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, there's so many different religions, Christian religions, non-Christian religions, what have you, that are out there. But the core fundamental of these religions is basically the same thing. Be a good person, take care of other people, be kind. I mean, that is what you're learning in all of these. So if you're able to take that away and apply it toward your person or your family, I think that does lend to more of that intimate type of relationship for sure. Right. If you're not connected on that level, I think that is noticeable.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it gives, when you are connected, as you were saying, it's like a higher sense of purpose amongst each other,
Yeah. And I mean, you see, families that pray together and families that go to families that pray together, stay together, and families that, they go to church together and stuff. And we did all that stuff when they were little. Yeah. But as they got older, I should say, or they got out of school and things, I think that they were I want to say traumatized, but it's like they went through Catholic school and they're all agnostic. I just find that so interesting. None of them are real. They don't identify as Catholic. And I guess I'm kind of that way too. It's like, it's the basic fundamentals of everything I learned and where I'm comfortable. And having an intimate relationship with God is part of that, you know, but everybody has a different way of doing that. As long as your kids can see that they are able to connect with you spiritually in some way, shape, or form. And it can be in a religious capacity. I think it can also be in a, when I say spiritual capacity, you know, even through, I know this is going to sound crazy, but even through like hot yoga or yoga in general, you know, you are kind of being present in the moment. You're really trying to clear your thoughts. You're trying to purify essentially a lot of what you're doing, and you're, you know, working your body, helping your body be stronger. I always walk away from those, and it's like Eileen says, it's like going to church. Like I go there on Sunday. It's like my church, because it is a way for you to be able to, in essence, in some respects, meditate on it.
Self-reflection. Yep. Self-reflection. And I think part of spiritual closeness is going to be having, again, meaningful conversations. And to your point, that if it's yoga every day or whatever it might be, if somebody gets up and hits the floor on their knees and prays every morning, whatever that daily activity, spiritual practice is, but making sure that you're doing that. And if you're in a relationship, even doing it together, again, that vulnerability piece comes into play, I think.
And some people are probably more comfortable with it than others. Even having a little prayer at the dinner table. I think that's wonderful to do. We don't do it all the time. We used to do it all the time. We don't do it all the time. But when you do, it's usually like a meal when everybody's together for us, for my family.
Yeah.
When everybody's together, it's a holiday or whatever. And there's always one person that's chosen that's like the most spiritual person of the group, you know, in the family.
That's how it always is.
That says the prayer and knows exactly what to say. And, you know, my nephew, my godson, he's so funny because he went to Catholic school, you know, pretty much all the way through. And the last school he went to before he went off to college was a Christian school, wasn't Catholic. But I'm telling you, that kid, he had his prayers nailed. So we always would be like, okay, Anthony, you're giving the prayers. And he sounded like he knew what he was doing. And then he stops, says amen, and then he's back to being his goofball self.
Yeah.
Hopefully, Anthony, if you're listening to this, I hope you know what all the words meant that you said. But yeah, I think, you know, when you're starting a meal out that way, it just kind of, I don't know, just kind of sets the tone for it. And that does develop an opportunity for people to have more intimate conversations with each other. The dinner table is probably the best place for that as a family, really, because there's no other distractions that are around. You're just sitting around with each other having a meal.
I like the holding hands around the table too when you do a prayer. Yeah.
That's nice too.
Yeah. But for spiritual intimacy, I think, you know, through all those things that we were just talking about, being able to identify the intention of those things in an intimate relationship is important also.
And that that it's genuine.
Right.
You know, that it's something that someone is doing genuinely because they are in a place where they desire to have a deeper relationship with the people that, you know, are close to them or that matter to them, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's intimacy. So it's not all about sex, people.
I mean,
that, as Michelle said, that is the cherry on top. Sex with an intimate partner that it gets it. Oh my God. Like you said, that is the best.
And there's going to be, what's so great about it is there's going to be those different personal connections depending on who that relationship is with, only meaningful and intimate to the two of you.
Right.
You know, when you're sharing that with somebody. So.
And this is an area where I would say, you know, we've talked in other episodes about settling. And this is an area where I would say that I will never settle, you know, because I want to have that with the right person. Of course, it's like, you can't just have it with anybody. Right. It's got to be with the right person.
It's very true.
So whether it ever happens or not is totally, you know, to be seen in the future. But it is a really wonderful, wonderful opportunity when you have that kind of connection with somebody.
Well, that was an interesting, I liked preparing for this because I was able to align it with so many personal things.
Yes.
You know, with my family, with my sweetheart, with my friends, you know, all those things. And again, y'all are my inner circle. So that's why I can relate a lot of this to you. Yeah.
The inner circle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's funny because one other little thing I was thinking about is, in speaking with people of an older generation, the intimacy that they have in their friendships and relationships, I've found, at least in my experience, is very different because they don't share. They don't really connect in the same way with people. It's kept more on the surface.
Yeah.
And I'm speaking about, my mom, that's how she was raised. Yeah, it's a generational thing. That's how she was raised. It's something that my sister and I don't quite get because we think differently, obviously, in a different generation, but I've definitely noticed that. And it's not saying that you want to be out there with your business with everybody, of course, but I call it the Jackie O syndrome, where you don't let your slip show.
Yes. Yeah. That's a good way of putting it.
We actually, my friend Jen, I think, had coined that there was a store manager at Nordstrom who was so put together, and she was like, her slip never would show, is how we would say it. It's, the proverbial slip, but there was no slip really, but you would see everything was on the surface. It was all put together, but it's like, you just didn't know what was going on underneath that surface. There was so much more. So I
call that living the lie.
Living the lie. Yeah. Yeah, that's another way of putting it.
Yeah.
And I think people have put, when work time and personal time are obviously two different things, and you're not going to get super intimate with people at work, probably, talking about things that you wouldn't maybe talk about while you're at work. You do develop close friendships, of course, and that stuff does end up coming out. I know I have. So, but yeah, I think that's maybe a little generational, is keeping a lot of that stuff, kind of the dirty laundry, or however you want to call it, keeping it out of reach of other people. So as a result, that vulnerability really is never experienced, maybe with a romantic partner, but other than that, not so much.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we're of the generation we are. There's a whole lot that we have learned.
I know.
We have the beauty of technology and so many things that we have access to be able to keep our minds going and full of information. So,
well, I think too, when we look at this day and age, having a conversation about intimacy is uncomfortable for people.
Yeah.
Having conversations about sex and intimacy and things that you don't talk about,
Right.
or when we grew up, you didn't talk about it. Nowadays, it still can be uncomfortable, but it's different.
It's recognized.
Yeah.
I think it's recognized now. So,
well, it's part of your being.
Yeah.
It's part of who you are. It's not like you're going to go have those conversations with people that you don't know, but definitely, there's people that I will have those conversations with. One of them sitting over here, Blondie. That is not something that happens with a lot of people.
Yeah. So be intimate, be aware, have sex, and enjoy life.
Yeah. And have that cherry on top.
Yeah. Don't forget the whipped cream.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody.
Whipped cream's fun.
It was a fun one. We'll see you soon.
Yeah. Thanks, you guys. Have a great one.
Bye.
Bye.